When we think of architecture, we often think of beautiful buildings that catch our eye. But have you ever wondered why buildings look the way they do? That's where the concept of form follows function comes in. Before we get into the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave a comment below and I will respond if you have subscribed already. Let's get on with the video. Louis Sullivan, an American architect, was the first to popularize the idea that a building's form should be determined by its function. He believed that a building's purpose and intended use should guide its design, rather than just aesthetics. Take the Guggenheim Museum in New York City, for example. Its unique design was intended to provide a space for visitors to view artwork in a continuous, uninterrupted flow. The building's spiral design allows visitors to walk up and down the ramps without ever having to turn around or backtrack. Similarly, the Sydney Opera House, designed by Danish architect Jan Utzon, was created to provide the best acoustics for the audience in its performance halls, rather than just focusing on its aesthetic appeal. The shells, which are the most iconic part of the building, were designed to ensure that sound was reflected evenly throughout the auditorium. Another example of form following function can be found in hospital buildings. Hospitals have very specific needs, such as separate entrances for ambulances and patients, as well as specialized equipment for medical procedures. The design of a hospital must take into account these needs, while still providing a welcoming and comforting environment for patients. The Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, is a prime example of a hospital building designed with its function in mind. The clinic's design focuses on creating an environment of healing and wellness for patients, as well as providing the necessary medical equipment and resources for staff. The spacious lobby is designed with natural lighting, comfortable furniture, and calming artwork to reduce patient anxiety and promote relaxation. Even houses can benefit from the concept of form following function. A well-designed home will have a layout that makes sense for the family living in it. For example, a family with young children might want a living room that is connected to the kitchen, so that parents can keep an eye on their children while cooking dinner. In contrast, a poorly designed house may have awkwardly placed rooms or doors that don't align with the flow of the home. This can lead to a feeling of disjointedness and make daily life less efficient and enjoyable. Form follows function is really at the core of good design. When I'm designing a building, I always start with the intended use and purpose of the space. From there, I can begin to think about how the space should be arranged and what materials would be best suited for the project. One of the biggest challenges we face as architects is balancing the desire for aesthetic beauty with the practical needs of the people who will use the building. It's a delicate balance, but it's essential to create spaces that are not only visually appealing, but also functional and efficient. Of course, not all architects adhere to the principle of form follows function. Some buildings prioritize form over function, resulting in designs that are impractical or even dangerous. However, it's important to note that form following function does not mean sacrificing aesthetics. In fact, a well-designed building that prioritizes function can often be more visually appealing than one that does not. By understanding the needs of the space and its users, an architect can create a design that is both beautiful and practical. When you look at a modern building, what do you see? Is it just a structure made of concrete and steel, or is there something more to it? But first, let's take a step back in time. For centuries, buildings were designed to be not only functional, but also ornate and decorative. Architects would create intricate facades and elaborate interiors to show off their skills and impress their clients. But in the early 20th century, a new approach emerged. Functionalism, also known as the International style, emphasized the use of simple forms and industrial materials to create buildings that were efficient, practical, and affordable. One of the most famous functionalist architects was Le Corbusier, a Swiss-French architect who designed a number of iconic buildings in the early to mid-20th century. His designs were characterized by clean lines, open spaces, and the use of industrial materials such as reinforced concrete and steel. One of the key principles of functionalism is the idea of open space. Rather than dividing a building into separate rooms and compartments, functionalist architects preferred to create large, open areas that could be used for a variety of purposes. Another important element of functionalism is natural light. By using large windows and skylights, architects could bring in plenty of natural light, reducing the need for artificial lighting, and creating a more pleasant and comfortable environment. Functionalists believed that architecture could play a role in improving society by creating buildings that were better suited to modern life. Flat roofs are also a hallmark of functionalist architecture. By eliminating traditional pitched roofs, architects could create more usable space on top of the building, as well as a more streamlined and modern appearance. Functionalist architecture is characterized by a minimalist aesthetic. Rather than using ornate details and decorations, functionalist architects preferred to let the building's structure and materials speak for themselves. From open space to natural light to minimalist design, these ideas have had a profound impact on the way we think about buildings today. Postmodernism emerged in the late 20th century as a response to the perceived limitations of modernism, which was characterized by a focus on functionalism, simplicity, and a rejection of ornamentation. Postmodernism sought to break free from these constraints and embrace a more eclectic and playful approach to architecture. Postmodern architects were inspired by a wide range of styles and historical periods, and they often combined elements from different styles in unexpected ways. Postmodern buildings are often characterized by their use of color, ornamentation, and historical references. One of the most famous postmodern architects was Robert Venturi, who argued that less is a bore, rejecting the modernist belief that simplicity was the key to good design. Venturi and other postmodernists sought to create buildings that were more expressive, playful, and accessible to the general public. Postmodernism had a significant impact on architecture in the late 20th century, and its influence can still be seen in many buildings today. Postmodernism challenged the notion that there was only one right way to design a building, and it opened up new possibilities for architects to explore different styles, materials, and forms. However, postmodernism also attracted criticism from some architects and critics who saw it as superficial and lacking in substance. Some argued that postmodernism was too focused on aesthetics and failed to address the social and environmental issues that architecture should be concerned with. Despite these criticisms, postmodernism remains an important movement in architecture, and its legacy can be seen in many of the buildings that define our cities today. Whether you love it or hate it, there's no denying that postmodernism has had a significant impact on the way we think about buildings and the built environment. Postmodernism had a significant impact on architecture in a number of ways. Here are a few of the key ways in which postmodernism affected architecture. A renewed focus on aesthetics. Postmodern architects rejected the idea that architecture should be purely functional, and instead emphasized the importance of aesthetics and visual appeal. Postmodern buildings often feature bright colors, playful shapes, and decorative elements that are meant to be visually engaging and interesting. A willingness to mix styles. Postmodern architects were not constrained by the idea that buildings should be designed in a single, unified style. Instead, they often mixed elements from different historical periods and styles, creating buildings that were eclectic and visually interesting. An embrace of ornamentation. Postmodern architects rejected the modernist belief that ornamentation was unnecessary and superficial. Instead, they embraced the use of decorative elements, such as arches, columns, and moldings, that were often inspired by historical styles. A focus on symbolism, postmodern architects often incorporated symbolic elements into their designs, using architecture to make a statement about society or culture. For example, some postmodern buildings feature elements that are meant to represent social or political ideas, such as freedom or democracy. A new approach to urban planning, postmodernism also had an impact on the way that architects and urban planners thought about the design of cities. Postmodern architects were often critical of the sterile, uniform environments that had been created by modernist planning, and instead sought to create urban spaces that were more varied and engaging. Overall, postmodernism had a significant impact on architecture, challenging traditional ideas about what buildings should look like and what they should represent. While some of the more extreme examples of postmodern architecture may be polarizing, it's clear that postmodernism helped to broaden the range of architectural styles and approaches that are considered valid and important. One way in which postmodernism and functionalism intersect is in the idea of form following function. Both functionalists and postmodernists believed that buildings should be designed to meet the needs of their intended purpose, and that the form of the building should be determined by its function. However, while functionalism emphasized simplicity and clarity in design, postmodernism embraced complexity and diversity. Postmodern architects often used ornamentation and historical references to create buildings that were visually engaging and interesting, even if they were not strictly necessary from a functional standpoint. In some cases, postmodernism also challenged the idea that function should be the primary driver of architectural design. Some postmodern architects sought to use architecture to make a statement about society or culture, using symbolism and metaphor to create buildings that were more than just functional spaces. So while there are some areas of overlap between postmodernism and functionalism, they are ultimately two distinct architectural movements with different goals and priorities. Postmodernism's emphasis on aesthetics and ornamentation represents a significant departure from the functionalist ideals of simplicity and clarity. That's it for today's video, hope it was informal and you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.